Well, greetings and salutations, everyone. How about a little bonus upload? Before we jump into it, a couple links. As you know, I rely on Patreon, PayPal, and the merch to help the channel to continue to grow and go. Links to Patreon and PayPal are in the description below. The merch is displayed directly under the video. Also, Dogman Frightening Encounters, Volume 1 through 3, the audiobook versions. They all were written and researched by Tom Lyons, narrated and produced by me, Jeff Nadolny. Those audiobooks are available on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes, links to which are also in the description as well. And finally, last but definitely not least, if you'd really like to help support this channel to continue to grow and go, simply subscribe. It does not cost a cent. Click that like button. It takes half a second. If you don't want to miss out on any of the informative and exciting uploads I put out daily, click that bell icon. And please, folks, leave a comment. Why? Well, because all these things, they really do help this channel to continue to grow and go. And they definitely do matter. Now, everyone, I have taken far too much of your time. Let's jump in to today's bonus, shall we? Today's first encounter. Alright, I haven't told many people this story because it's just kind of silly. It happened maybe 15 or so years ago. I'm going to have to describe the area for this to really make sense, so bear with me. The place I was living in was a really old house that was haunted, but that's a story for another time. At the corner of what was the first paved road in town, and a dirt road that splits off into the paved road with a few homes along it. And on the other side of the fork stays dirt for around a quarter of a mile and ends at my dad's farm. In front of the house, across the road, is a set of train tracks and another road. It's used to be an intersection across the tracks, a T-junction with another road, but they took out the crossing in the 70s. There are houses on one side. On the other, there's an old lot that used to be a granary and an old defunct water tower. We explored both extensively when we were kids. The granary had been demolished by the time this happened, but the water tower was still standing. At night, my side of the road was dark, but the other side was well lit by a floodlight on a big storage building. It shone on the empty lot that had a few trees in it, and was overgrown with grass. There was also a streetlight at the intersection. It looked super creepy. My kid said she saw shadow people up there regularly. Her window faced the old intersection and lot. This happened at probably midnight or so. I decided to walk up to the 24-hour gas station to get a couple of sodas. I usually cross the tracks at the old intersection instead of walking up the road in front of my house, since that avoided a small but steep hill. As I was stepping onto the tracks, I saw something move in the empty lot. It did look like it could have been a person darting very quickly behind one of the trees. It seemed suspicious, and we do have meth heads around, so I stood still and waited to see if there was something in that lot. After what felt like a very long time, but was probably only a minute or so, it moved again, then stepped out into the open. I could only see the shadow, though it looked very black, darker than the surrounding shadows. It was shaped, and I swear, like the werewolf from that old Dark Stalkers game, with a long, crooked nose, big paws, super skinny middle, and bushy tail. It snuck across the open area to hide behind another tree. It moved in an exaggerated way, like a cartoon. I'd be surprised when I first saw it, but before I could really register it enough to feel anything close to being scared, I made the connection with the shape, and it seemed ridiculous. I saw its nose poke out from behind the tree, then it leaned out again with an exaggerated movement. "I see you," I shouted. It ducked behind the tree again. I stood there for a while longer, but there was no further movement. I crossed the tracks and walked along the road by the lot, and everything seemed normal. I've seen a lot of weird things, but this was just, well, I don't really know what to make of it. Today's second encounter. This was something that happened to my husband and I about 9 years ago. We had gone to watch one of our friends' bands play, and we were heading home from downtown Dallas. It was around 1 in the morning, but we still had plans before I was expected home, still dating at the time. So we headed to his apartment in one of the South Dallas suburbs. This was a pretty well-populated suburb, but by the time we had gotten close to the apartment, the roads were pretty much empty. We exited the highway and turned onto the street that led to his apartment. But as soon as we passed the traffic light under the highway, we both saw it, plain as day. Stone sober and wide awake, we both saw this mother effing werewolf-type creature exit a neighborhood street and calmly run in about 4 steps across a 4-lane road. It was about 75 yards in front of us, but it wasn't exactly the way I'd imagine a werewolf. It was completely canine. No human features at all, except for the fact that it was on 2 legs. The legs were massive, and the thing was about 7 feet tall, but the arms reminded me of a T-Rex. They were small, and still hung like dog legs. They seemed very useless if this thing was trying to attack something. The head was also odd. Besides being a typical dog color, grayish-black, the eyes were bright glowing yellow, even when there weren't headlights shining directly in them. It didn't look like the glow an animal gets from lights in their eyes anyway. But the thing that stood out to me the most was that the eyes were bioclear like a fish. I saw the eyes clearly, even though he was completely profiled to us. I never forgot how fast this thing was either. The road we were driving on had heavy trees to the right-hand side of us, and when it came out, it was running but crossed this road in just a few steps. It was big enough and effortlessly fast enough to know that a human couldn't have dressed up and done this. There was an open field that it ran into. When my husband and I got to where the trees broke, we both turned our heads to look, but it was long gone by then, about 4 seconds. I think the only thing that was said was a quiet, "What the fuck?" by me. Here's a little more detail on what it looked like, even though it was a lot less scary than what I imagined a werewolf to look like. When it was running across the road, I didn't get the sense that it cared that we saw it, or that it was even trying that hard to cross the road before we got any closer. I didn't feel fear as if we were threatened, only a disbelief, really. And again, it wasn't like we were in a rural area by any stretch of the imagination. When we passed the tree line, his apartment complex was literally another 150 yards or so up the road. We hurried in and didn't exactly get to our plans. We basically just sat in silence, trying to rationalize, I guess. Still, to this day, I often think to myself, I mean, really, did this really happen? But as soon as I close my eyes and think about it, those bright yellow eyes are still there. Today's third encounter. This story takes place my freshman year of college at the University of Alabama. Since I was living in the dorms, my friends and I would often drive off campus and into the country in order to smoke some weed away from the RAs and campus PD. On this particular night, one of my friends and I had just finished rolling a giant blunt and drove off into the night to enjoy it. Once we were far enough away, we went ahead and lit it up and continued to drive throughout the duration of it. After it was finished, we drove into a thick fog. Had to drive 5 miles an hour because we literally couldn't see. We ended up driving out of it and found ourselves in familiar territory. I usually drove away from campus without any real destination, but reflexes, etc., would tend to lead me down the same path. Anyway, we had been up there before on previous nights, and there's this creepy stop sign which appears black and unreadable until you're literally 5 feet from it, which we always thought was weird. That has nothing to do with the story, but I tend to ramble, especially when reliving things like this. So after driving out of the fog, we were driving past some random houses in the country, and we noticed this giant black figure and eyes staring at us from the front of someone's yard. We both did a double take, like, did you see that thing? It was so significant that I 3-point turned my car around to get a better look. Heading back, I creeped along slowly until we got back to the thing and just stared at it completely silent. At this point, my car was almost at a stop while I stared in amazement at this giant creature. The thing took notice and stood up slowly onto 4 feet, and then onto its hind legs, and I mean this thing was huge. If I were to guess, I would say at least 7 to 8 feet tall. After a couple of seconds, it tears off towards us, running like a cheetah, basically launching itself through the air with its front legs. When I see this, I slam on the gas and start to take off, but the creature reaches the side of my car before I can accelerate fast enough to lose it. It's now on the passenger side of my car, running along with us and staring at my friend through the open window. He's pushing me against the driver's side door in order to give himself distance away from this monster. Judging by the size of my car and that thing's head was literally staring at us through the window, I would say it stood at least 4 to 5 feet on 4 legs, and had a giant head with huge fangs, easily capable of ripping off an arm or one of us out of the car. Eventually, with my foot all the way onto the gas pedal, while staring at this beast in horror and amazement, we gain enough speed to start pulling away from it. 30 to 40 miles, I'd guess. The beast tears off into the woods. We both sat there in silence until we gather ourselves and recount what we saw in order to make sure we both saw the same thing. Some of you may criticize this, since we were both high, but this was an everyday occurrence, and we both saw the same terrifying thing. After analyzing other more light creatures, we came across a picture of a hairless bear, which honestly does not look like what we saw. Today's fourth encounter. It was early in the morning, and the sun had come up, but it wasn't all the way up. It was still bright enough to see without headlights. I was driving up into Jefferson Memorial Forest. There's a few houses, but the further up you go, the sparser they get. I just looked down at my radio for a second, and then when I looked back up, I saw something had crossed the road in front of me. It was going into the forest, and I only saw the very back end of it. It had no tail, at least, that I could see, and it looked like it was on all fours. But again, all I saw was the hind quarters. My first thought was deer. But this was much, much taller than a deer. It was at least the height of a horse or moose, and we don't have moose up here, and horses normally don't roam the forest. At least that's what I know. What really caught my attention was it was black. I mean, the blackest I've ever seen an animal. It almost looked like a silhouette. Another thing that I found curious but didn't think about until after was its hind legs bent forward. Deer and horses' hind legs are bent backwards, kind of like a less than sign. This thing's hind legs were more like a greater than. I slowed down, looking into the woods where it crossed, but I couldn't see it. I was probably about 50 yards away from it when it crossed the road from me. Again, I don't think it was a Dogman, but it was something I had never seen. I also know that mind can play some tricks. Well, I'm thinking you saw a Dogman. Today's fifth and final encounter. I live in a small town called Penfield in Clearfield County, PA. This encounter happened in late July of 2015. I was driving home from work on a Boy Scout road in Penfield. I usually stick to main roads when driving home, but sometimes take back roads to take in the scenery. As I was coming around a bend, I saw this large, brownish creature crouching on the side of the road. I slowed down to get a better look, and that's when it turned its head towards my vehicle. It had a large head and yellowish glow to its eyes and a long snout. I couldn't believe what I was looking at. It was eating roadkill, I believe a deer. At this point, I slammed my foot onto the gas pedal and didn't let off the gas until I reached my home. I then jumped out of my car and ran into the house and locked my doors. I grabbed my rifle from my closet and loaded it. I then went into the basement and took out a silver letter opener that I had gotten after my grandfather passed away. I haven't seen anything since, but I would like to add that about a month prior to this, I was at a local mini-mart getting some gas. The Game Commission officer pulled to the next pump. Attached to his truck was a trailer, and in that trailer was elk. A lot of elk have radio collars, and when one dies, it's game commissioner job to go figure out how it died and take samples. I asked the man what happened to it. It was a young elk, maybe 2 or 3 years old at the most. It looked fine to me, except for the fact that its throat was slit. He told me he has no clue, and that when he found it, the collar it had been wearing was about 10 feet away. He said my first thought was bear, as it's the only animal around here large enough to take a bull elk down. But there was no evidence indicating it was a bear. Plus, he told me the cut on its throat was too clean. After the conversation, I didn't think too much until I saw that thing that night. I'm a very facts-based person, and I don't hold any personal beliefs as far as supernatural things are concerned. But since that night, I don't know what to think anymore. Bonus encounter, 2015, Ann Arbor, Michigan. Person wishing to remain anonymous reports, it was late at night after a small barbecue/party at my uncle's farm, miles north of Ann Arbor. I was coming out of the barn to get some more food when I heard sticks breaking in the tree line to my right. About 7 feet off the ground, a long muzzle poked through the trees, followed by a full figure of this creature. It was only 20 feet away from me, so I got the full picture. It was tall and lean, but very muscular. It had a distinct brown pelt on its body with blackish fur on its shoulders. It had huge paws for feet, but its hands looked like they had 5 fingers, so they resembled long human hands, except for the fur and claws on them. Its head was the scariest. This thing had a set of canines that were so huge. It looked like it was snarling, but I believe it was trying to smile. My father, uncle, cousin, and grandfather all came out of the barn. It turned around, dropped onto all fours, and leapt into the forest, making only the slightest sound. It's easy to dismiss such stories as imaginations of a nut job or the result of impairment. Our logic minds flip through the Rolodex of extenuating factors, tricks of the light and shadow, stress, hallucinations, disorders of one kind or another, a need for attention, or just flat out being a liar. But not always. Sometimes the story is what it is. The following instant happened just as I told it. This is my encounter. I have no penship or patience for cryptozoology, nor was I impaired. Alright folks, just a quick bonus upload to help your Sunday just move along a little smoother and a little quicker. Guys, I hope you enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed sharing it with you. I'd like to thank you all for supporting this channel. Your support is what makes this channel special. And with that being said, please stay safe, happy, healthy, and ever vigilant. Please keep an eye on your loved ones, your friends, your family. We know these creatures are real. And it is up to us to keep the people we care about informed, regardless of what they may think. Just kind of mention it. Once you put that word, you don't have to jam it down their throat, excuse me. They might not believe in Bigfoot, Dogman, whatnot. But just mention it. Hey, there's been a lot of strange attacks. Hey, there's been this. Did you ever hear about this? Then that gets the curiosity going. God bless you all.